Hello and welcome back. Now that you have access to the required software, we're going to go on a quick tour of RStudio, your digital home for a long time to come. So let's get started. Your learning objective for this session is that you can identify and use the following tabs in RStudio: the source, the console, the environment, the history, the files, the plots, the packages, the help, and the viewer. Now that's quite a lot to go over, so it's important that you do not panic. We are going to cover a lot of territory fairly quickly in this lesson, but we do not expect you to remember this all on the first go. Rather, as you go through the course, you will assimilate some of this material because you will encounter it many times. So hope you're feeling ready. Let's go. Now, of course, before you can get started, you need to open RStudio. So if you're working on the cloud, you can go to rstudio.cloud as we did last time and open this project that we created, the RIntro project. If you haven't created that project yet, just click on a new project and create it. If you're working on your local computer, you just go to your applications folder and open RStudio from there. And once I've clicked on the RIntro project here, I get the nice RStudio interface. It might look a little bit different depending on your operating system. That is totally fine. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, so make sure that you can actually see the code, although that might be a bit too large. Let's see how it goes. Now, as you can see, RStudio is divided into what we call panes here, sort of like window panes. We seem to have this one pane which has a number of tabs, another pane which has a number of tabs, and this large pane here. There's actually one more pane that's missing, and to make sure we can see that, I'm going to click on File, New File, and open a new R script. So now as we can see, there are actually 4 panes. Before we start thinking about these panes, though, we're going to rearrange them to make RStudio a little bit more usable. To rearrange these panes, we're going to go to Tools, okay, then Global Options, and we're going to go to the pane layout option there, all right? And we leave the source where it is, but we're going to change that right pane to the console, okay? Then for this bottom left pane, we're going to uncheck everything, uncheck all of these tabs, okay? And then we're going to basically transfer those over to the right pane. So in this bottom right pane here, we're going to have environment, history, files, plots, packages, help, that's all good, viewer, and presentations. We don't really need presentations, so we're going to uncheck that, and we're going to press OK. Okay, wonderful. The reason we've just done this is to make sure we have enough space for the editor or the source, which is where you're going to write code. So now we're going to click on that button there to maximize the editor. Okay. And now we can get started working with RStudio properly. Now, another thing to note, though, is that you can easily resize any of these panes by just dragging your cursor along the divider between the panes, as you can see there. Actually, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. I think this is maybe a bit too tight. All right, let's start talking about the editor. So the editor, also called the source, is where you type out your R code. Let's go ahead and type out some random piece of R code right now. I'm going to type print, in parentheses, excited for R. Okay, and make sure you're following along with me so you can get that muscle memory in. So once I've typed that, I'm going to press Command Enter to run the code. If you're on Windows, that might be Control Enter. So I press here Command Enter, and that has run the code. How do I know it ran the code? Because I can see that it sent this blue line here to the console, and the output of that code, which is the text excited for R, was printed also in the console. This number 1 just means that's the first line of the output that was printed. Okay? We can run multiple lines of R code in the following way. I'm going to type another line, make sure you're following along with me. Print and RStudio. Okay? Another exclamation point. Now to run these 2 lines, all you need to do is highlight those 2 lines of code by dragging your cursor. And again, you can press Command Enter or Control Enter, and that will again send the code to the console. And now we can see we have those 2 lines here, print excited for R and print and RStudio. Wonderful. If you want to select all of the code you have written, you can use the shortcut Command A or Control A. So now I'm going to press Command A on my keyboard, and that automatically selects all the code. And of course, I can run that code again by pressing Command Enter, and we've sent that code once more to the console. Very simple. Now let's see how we can pop this script window out of RStudio. Sometimes you want to work on it on its own. There's a little button here that lets you pop out this window, or pop out that pane rather, okay? Oh, it says that there's some mistake, I need to try again. I've been blocked by Safari, so I'm going to try that one more time. And now it has shown me the popped out RStudio editor. Sometimes that is useful for your workflow. We're going to put it back by pressing on that same button, okay? Now the last thing we're going to talk about for the editor is how to save the code or the script that you just started writing. So to do that, of course, you can just press Command S or Control S on Windows. I press that here, and I'm going to save it with the name RStudio Intro. RStudio Intro. Okay, and I don't need that capitals there. I can save that. And if you are on a local computer, it might ask you where exactly do you want to save that file. For now, just save it anywhere that's easy to find on your computer. We'll come back later and think about what are intelligent ways to store your files. So for now, we're basically done thinking about the RStudio editor. The next thing we're going to look at is the data viewer, which also comes up in this top left pane. So to trigger the data viewer, you need to try to view some data set. But we don't have any data loaded into R yet, so we're going to use one of the built-in data sets. So I'm going to type the command to view data, and it's just the word view. Notice the capital letter there for the V, okay? And I'm going to view some data set which is called women, okay? And I'm going to press Command Enter while having my cursor again anywhere in that line, all right? I press that, and you can see this data viewer for the women data set, okay? This is a familiar spreadsheet view. You can sort it by clicking on these icons here. You can filter it. You can scroll through. You can search it. I'll let you play with this if you like. Pause the video and play with some of this functionality to make sure you are familiar with it. For now, we're going to close that tab by clicking on the X beside women, and that will return us to our regular script. Now, having done all that, we're basically done with our discussion of this top left pane of RStudio. We can now proceed to thinking about the console. Now, as you have seen, the console seems to be where our code gets run. So far, we've been typing code into the script and sending it to the console, but you can also type code directly into the console. Let's try that right now by typing some calculation. I can type 2 plus 2, okay? And that gets run in the console, and we get the output of 4. An important thing to note about the console is that if you put your cursor anywhere in the console, or rather on the bottom line of the console, and you press the up key, you can scroll through past code that you have run, okay? And to run that past code, you can again press Enter. In this case, you don't have to press Command Enter because you're in the console. You can just press Enter. And as you've seen, we have rerun that view women code, and we get that data set again. I'm going to close that tab one more time. So that's the basics of the console. It's where you can type out some code in a quick manner if you don't want to save it in a nice script that you want to reuse later. Now, RStudio Cloud has brought up a terminal tab and a background jobs tab. We don't need to think about that for now. We can jump directly to the environment tab. Now, like I mentioned before, the environment tab shows you objects or data sets that are stored in R. Let's import a data set from the internet to see how the environment tab works. So I'm going to copy this code here that imports the data set Ebola data from a Google Sheet, okay? And you're going to have to type this out manually. Sorry about that. It's a bit of a long URL, but I trust that you can do that. It's tinyurl.com/ebola-data-sample with the HTTPS as a prefix, okay? So I'm going to run that code again by putting my cursor anywhere in the line and pressing Command Enter. And after a few seconds, we're going to see Ebola data show up there in the environment. It tells us the number of observations or rows of this table and the number of variables or columns, okay? If we click on that blue arrow beside Ebola data, we can see all of the columns that are in that data set. And if you click directly on the name of the data, it will open again this familiar spreadsheet view of the data. If you like, you can take some time and play with that. For now, I'll close that tab, okay, and think about how can we remove this object from our workspace, from our environment. To do that is very simple. There's a nice R command called rm, which stands for remove, and we can type rm Ebola data. We can put the name of that object in these parentheses there. We can run that with Command Enter, and we have removed that data set from our environment. Now we can move on to the History tab. Now, as the name suggests, the History tab will show you code that you have run previously. So you can see it shows all of the code that we have previously run. If you click on a line there, you can either send that code to the console or send it to the source. Let's try sending one of those to the console. So I click to console there, and as you can see, that got sent to my console, from which I can press enter to run it. Okay, if I want to send it to source, let's try that with excited for R. I send that to source, that puts it in our script. Okay, sometimes that's useful. If you want to run multiple lines of code, or if you want to highlight multiple lines of code there, you can use the shift click method. So you click on a line, then you hold shift and click on the last line that you want to select, and that will auto select everything you need. Let's imagine we wanted to send all of that to console. We can click to console there, okay? Now shift click is generally useful for most of your computing tasks, so hopefully that will come in handy for you in many other contexts. So that's the basics of the history pane. Take some time and try to play with some of the other options there, some of these buttons above. Notice that there's a search bar, okay? Because in this session, we're not being very comprehensive. We just want to show you the essentials, but it's good to take time, pause the video, and play with some of the other buttons. Let's move over now to the Files pane. Now, what does the Files pane help you do? It helps you interact with your computer's file system. Here, you can create new files, delete old files, rename files, find your R scripts, and so on. Again, I'm going to let you play with some of these icons up there. If I expand that pane a little bit, then I can see what they actually stand for. Okay, so take some time, pause the video. In particular, I want you to try creating a new R script, number one. Try deleting that script. Then try creating a new one and renaming it, okay? So again, those would be new blank file, delete, and rename. Make sure you know how to use those buttons. Next, we're going to move over to the Plots tab, okay? So I'm going to click here on Plots. Now, what does Plots do? It shows us, of course, the plots that we've created in R. Let's create one example plot by running some code in our script. So again, I hope you're still following along with me. I'm going to type plot and then women. And I'm going to run that code. And it sends the code to our console, but there's no output in the console. Rather, the output is here in the Plots tab. The plot looks a bit stupid right now because it's super compressed. So to make that look a bit more sensible, we're going to increase the size of that Plots pane. And you can see the plot of the weight and the height of American women. I think that's what this data set refers to. Again, I want you to take some time, pause the video, and try playing with some of those icons. In particular, you should know how to export a plot from this section. We're getting close to the end now. Let's look at the Packages tab. So I'm going to click on Packages. Now, the Packages tab helps you install and load packages. What is a package? It is a collection of our code that extends the functionality of R. Now, this tab here shows you any of the packages that are installed on your system, and it shows you the packages that are loaded. So packages that are loaded have this tick mark there, okay? And packages that are installed are the packages that are shown on the list. So if you want to install a new package, there's a button for you. And if you want to load a package, you can tick any of those. To use an R package, it has to be both installed and loaded. We're going to come back to this later. Do not panic. But one thing I'll mention here, though, is that usually for interacting with packages, we do not want to use this graphic user interface. Rather, we'd like to play with that using code, or rather modify that using code. So let's try to do that right now. We're going to try to install the package called HiCharter, which gives us nice visualizations in R. So I'm going to type install.packages. This is the command to install a package. Then I'm going to open up some quotes, okay? And RStudio nicely auto-completes that close quote for me. And then HiCharter, okay? Make sure you're following along, please. And I'm going to press enter on that. And now we're going to see some magic happening over there in the console. RStudio is installing HiCharter along with a number of dependencies that HiCharter has. Now, don't be scared of this stuff. It looks red and it looks angry, but it's actually all good. As that's running, I'm actually going to do the next step, which is to load the package. So to do that, I'm going to type library, okay? Because I'm loading the package from the R library, and then HiCharter, okay? And once this is done compiling, it's almost done. Once that's done, then I'm going to load it with a library. So it's actually done, although it gives me a bunch of warning messages. Don't be scared. We can see here there's a line that says done HiCharter. That means the package is installed. And we can verify that it's installed actually by making sure that it shows up in this list. So let's quickly look for HiCharter there. Okay, so we can see it there above HTML tools. We have HighCharter. Okay, and now that we've installed it, we can load it. So to load it, I type library HighCharter and I run that. And now we can actually use some packages, or rather some functions from the HighCharter package. Now that we've loaded it, we can use some functions from the HighCharter package. You do not yet quite know what a function is properly, but you'll see that very soon. So let's go ahead and try to do what I'm suggesting there, which is to use a function from the HighCharter package. I type HighCharter. I type 2 colons, okay, and then I can see already all the functions that are in the HighCharter package, but the one I'm interested in is HChart, okay, HChart, and what are we going to plot? We're going to plot the heights of the women in that women data set we looked at before, women, and then the $sign, okay, and height, okay. Now I really feel like there's a lot of stuff here you've never seen before. This might seem like gibberish to you. That is completely fine. All I wanted to show you is the idea that you can install a package and you can use specific components on of that package after you've installed it. So let's go ahead and press enter on that, or command enter. And what that shows us over here is a nice interactive histogram. Hopefully you know what a histogram is. If not, you can pause and Google it. It shows us a histogram of the heights of women in that data set. It's not a very useful figure. It's just for illustration. Okay? And we also have a nice opportunity to look at another tab there, which is the Viewer tab. The Viewer tab shows you interactive documents, or HTML documents that you create or generate using your R code. Now the last tab we're going to look at is the Help tab. So we open that up. And usually how you're going to interact with the Help tab is by searching for documentation about certain R functions or R data sets that you are confused about. So let's try that now with this HChart thing that we used there. So to search for the help on HChart, we're going to use a question mark, and then HChart, okay? And we can run that line of code. And what it shows us there is some documentation about what HChart does. Now, a little secret, many of these help files are not always super helpful for beginners, okay? But over time, you will start to understand them a little bit more. But at the moment, they might seem a bit too technical for you to understand, okay? But now we've looked at the help for the HChart. Let's look at the help for the women data set that we looked at before. So I'm going to type question mark women and run that. And this we can actually understand, okay? So the women data set, which we've been looking at, shows the average heights and weights for American women. And it's in height and pounds, okay? Sorry, it's in inches and pounds, okay? Inches for the height and pounds for the weight. Okay, so we're basically done looking at all of the tabs of RStudio. That went by quickly, didn't it? So the next thing we're going to look at are some special options that will make RStudio a little bit easier to use. So again, we go to Tools and then Global Options, as we did in the beginning. And we're going to change a few things. The first thing is we're going to go to Code and then Display. And here we're going to allow R to highlight our function calls. So let's see what that does. Highlight our function calls. If I press OK, you can see now that the functions are a slightly different color. I don't know if you can notice that. Now they're slightly blue, okay? And that's helpful to make your code a little bit more readable. And we're going to change the color of those functions in a second, actually. Let's go back to Code again, Display. The next thing we're going to do is check rainbow parentheses. So I'm going to click rainbow parentheses. And what that does is whenever you have nested parentheses in R, nested parentheses means you have one pair of parentheses and then another pair outside of it, okay? And this will happen often in R. Here it's not really necessary, it's a bit silly, but often in your R code you end up having nested parentheses. The rainbow parentheses will give the pairs different colors, and this helps you to match them and prevent any errors in the R code that you type. So we've checked now the rainbow parentheses. The next thing we're going to do is allow you to change the view of your editor. So let's go ahead and go to Global Options again. And then under Code, sorry, not under Code actually, under Appearance, you can see a number of editor themes, and you can pick any of these. Students always get very excited about these editor themes. So pause the video, take some time, and scroll through them and see which of those you like best. The ones that we would recommend are the following: the Crimson editor, if you want a light theme, okay? And if you want a dark theme, we would recommend the Tomorrow Night. Our recommendation is not based on much though, so if you prefer something else, go ahead and stick with that. So for now, we're going to try and use the Crimson editor, okay, and press OK. And as you can see, our code has changed much of its colors. The final thing we're going to do is make some changes about how R treats data sets that have been loaded into the environment. Remember that we loaded before this Ebola data into the environment. Let me load that in again. Now we're going to make some changes about how R will treat that data set. The first change we want to make, let me leave that for now. The first change we want to make is that we don't want R to remember this workspace. We don't want R to remember that this data set was loaded. We want R to forget about that data so that each time we come back and open this script, we have to re-import that data set. The reason we're doing this might not be super clear at the moment, but just do it and you'll thank us later, and we'll explain it later. We'll explain why we're doing this. Okay, so to do that, we're going to go to Global Options, and then here in General, under Workspace, we're going to uncheck Restore.R data into Workspace at Startup. So that won't restore any data you've loaded in. And the next thing, Save Workspace to R data on exit, we're going to change that from Ask to Never. Okay, so those two changes will save you a lot of headache in your R career. So we press OK, and now we're done with some of the essential settings that will make RStudio very usable over the next few weeks. Now the last thing we're going to look at is the RStudio command palette. This is a searchable list of RStudio menu options and settings. To trigger this, we're going to type Command-Shift-P, use the shortcut Command-Shift-P, or on Windows, Control-Shift-P. So I do that there, and I have this nice searchable list of many different RStudio options. For example, if I want to create a new document, I can type New, and we have all the different options for kinds of documents. If I want to rename a document, I can search Rename. Okay? If I want to change one of the RStudio settings, for example, the changes we just made with the workspace, I can search for Workspace. And here we can see that change we just made by changing the Save Workspace on Quit to Never. You can change that directly from here. So what this is it gives you a quick way to access many of the RStudio options instead of having to click on those menu options. So this will come in helpful for you in quite a few cases. Okay, so basically we have now covered the essentials of the RStudio interface. There is a lot, of course, that we haven't covered. So one thing that might be helpful for you is the official RStudio cheat sheet. To find that, you can go to the following link, rstudio.com/resources/cheat sheets, or you could just Google search RStudio cheat sheets, and it'll bring you to this page here. If you search on the page for IDE, you can see the RStudio IDE cheat sheet, which you can download. I've already pre-downloaded that, and we can take a look at some of the stuff there. It's really a nice documentation about each of the different RStudio options, how you can navigate, how to open in a new window, save, find and replace, and so on and so forth, many of which we didn't cover in this lesson. So go ahead and browse through that file to get a bit more of a handle on the RStudio interface. So congratulations, you are now a new citizen of RStudio. Of course, we've only covered the surface of the functionality of this wonderful IDE. As you advance in your R journey, you'll come to discover more and more great features. We're excited to be part of that journey with you, so I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye-bye.
For more resources, visit our website, where you can track your progress, access interactive quizzes and lesson notes, and connect with our teachers and other learners like you. And if you'd like a more guided experience, we also offer live online bootcamps with expert help. So join us at thegraphcourses.org to start your learning journey today.